All right, welcome back, everybody. So we have with us law and crimes reporter Elizabeth Milner, who has been inside that courtroom for every day of testimony. And
what could possibly shatter the polished calm of a courtroom, stun the world, and thrust Hollywood into the eye of a storm? What could be so explosive that George Clooney, Oscar winner, humanitarian, and a close friend of a U.S. president, would break a vow of silence kept for over a decade? Why would he risk everything to utter just 9 words that could potentially send Sean Diddy Combs to prison for life? On day 16 of the federal trial against Sean Diddy Combs, no one, not even the most seasoned legal analysts, could have predicted the bombshell that was about to be dropped. A name echoed through the halls of the courthouse, one so revered it seemed untouchable: George Clooney. The same George Clooney known not only for his brilliance on screen, but also for his tireless activism and principled stand on human rights. Clooney, often regarded as the moral compass of Hollywood, a figure who had skillfully balanced fame with dignity, stood before the court with a gaze that cut through the noise. He wasn't there to promote a film, attend a gala, or smile for flashing cameras. He was there to tell a story so chilling, so steeped in shadows that it silenced even the most cynical of reporters. From secret backroom conversations shrouded in power games to elite suites guarded by silence. From celebrities who seemed to disappear without a trace after attending exclusive soirees to anonymous letters delivered in ink the color of blood. Clooney laid it all bare. He didn't come with metaphors or riddles. He came with memory, unfiltered and unflinching. He came with names that, if verified, could tear down empires and reduce titans to dust. Why now? Why would a man who had everything, fame, fortune, respect, put it all on the line? What dark secret compelled him to rise from the safety of silence and step into the fire? Because what he knew could no longer be buried. As Clooney took the stand, the courtroom itself seemed to pause. A murmur rippled through the crowd, disbelief painted across the faces of those in attendance. Even the court's stenographer, seasoned by years of trials and testimonies, paused for a split second before resuming her work. George Clooney, the very same man often seen rubbing shoulders with international leaders like Barack Obama and President Joe Biden, was now staring down one of entertainment's most powerful and feared figures. He locked eyes with the jury, his expression a storm of regret, fury, and quiet determination. Then, with a voice clear and deliberate, he began. Each word struck like a lightning bolt. Reporters nearly knocked over chairs in a scramble to capture every syllable. Spectators stopped breathing. This wasn't just testimony. It was a declaration, a seismic shift in the courtroom dynamics. But again, the question lingered in every mind. Why would George Clooney, who has always stood above the fray, risk his legacy to confront Diddy? What truth was so hideous that it shattered years of restraint? Let's unravel the testimony, piece by piece. George Clooney's account began with a revelation that stunned the courtroom into absolute silence. Diddy approached him in 2013 with a meticulously calculated plan. His voice, tinged with bitterness and disappointment, painted a picture of ambition veiled in manipulation. It wasn't just about fame, Clooney stated. It wasn't just about music or being a mogul. He wanted something far greater: political power. Influence on a global scale. At an exclusive white party in the Hamptons, Clooney recalled, Diddy had leaned in and whispered words that would later haunt him. Rap won't change the world. True power lives at the UN, the World Economic Forum, the Gates Foundation. And George, you're my ticket to that world. This wasn't the ambition of a man seeking personal growth. It was the scheme of someone who saw influence as currency and connections as weapons. Diddy didn't just want to rebrand. He wanted to rewrite his identity, from a controversial figure in hip-hop to a polished diplomat, shaking hands with kings, CEOs, and senators. Clooney, long respected in both Hollywood and Washington, became the perfect vessel for this transformation. He thought I was a shortcut, Clooney continued, a bridge to the people who matter, but I saw through him. I saw what he really was. Instead of cutting ties, Clooney made a dangerous choice. He played along. "I figured if you don't enter the tiger's den, how can you catch the beast?" he said. His eyes narrowed, glinting with resolve. So I accepted his invitation. I stepped into his world, pretending to be an ally, while documenting everything. The courtroom sat frozen. This was no mere grudge. This was a calculated counteroffensive. Diddy was no fool, Clooney admitted. He was a master of charm and control. For over a year, he only let me into the surface layer, his white parties. Lavish, glamorous affairs filled with Hollywood elites, tech billionaires, and global policymakers sipping champagne and plotting futures. But beneath the laughter and luxury was something darker. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And I was there to find it. Powerful people don't reveal themselves in boardrooms or press conferences. True intent is whispered in dark corridors and buried deep beneath concrete. For George Clooney, the mask of Diddy's charm finally cracked in the summer of 2013. Until then, Diddy had been careful, asking vague questions about politics during parties, as if probing for signs of loyalty or testing whether Clooney was someone who could be pulled deeper into the fold. But that summer, everything changed. It began with a simple, unmarked envelope, no return address. Just a smooth white card inside, unadorned except for GPS coordinates and a single timestamp, 2:00 IE. I thought it was a prank, Clooney testified. It felt like something out of a spy thriller. But then came the text. A message from an unknown number buzzed on his phone. It read, "Follow the coordinates, wear black, leave your phone behind." Clooney's instincts screamed at him to turn away, but curiosity, laced with a gnawing sense of unease, overpowered caution. He wasn't going in blind, though. "I made a plan," he said firmly. "I wasn't going to walk into the abyss without a rope to pull me back." That night, a black SUV picked him up, gliding through deserted streets, slicing through industrial zones where even streetlights dared not flicker. Eventually, they arrived at an abandoned parking lot attached to a world-famous amusement park, one visited by millions every year. "I can't name it," Clooney said, his eyes locking with each juror. "But you know it. Everyone does. Families laugh there, kids take pictures there, and beneath all that joy, something monstrous." Behind a concrete service wall, barely visible to the casual eye, was a hidden steel door. Clooney described the moment vividly. The cold sting of the air as he stepped inside, the echo of his own footsteps in a narrow corridor of reinforced concrete, and the men who greeted him there weren't typical guards. They weren't bodyguards, Clooney said flatly. They were machines in human skin. Silent, precise, unflinching. They didn't need to check my ID. They already knew who I was. At the corridor's end stood a heavy iron door. When it opened, Clooney entered a vast underground chamber, bathed in dim amber light. The air throbbed with low, pulsating music, like the heartbeat of some slumbering creature waiting to awaken. "This wasn't a party," Clooney said, voice low but steady. "It was a ritual." His words hung in the courtroom like smoke. Clooney described seeing figures he had only ever associated with philanthropy, creativity, and public service. Billionaires, Academy Award winners, tech moguls, even a few elected officials. They weren't networking, they wore robes, masks, and each guest signed a non-disclosure agreement before entering, as if this entire grotesque experience was simply another routine on their calendar. They laughed, Clooney said. They participated. They protected one another. It wasn't about indulgence, it was about control. He paused, visibly pained by the memory. These events, he continued, were meticulously designed. You didn't just attend for pleasure. You attended to be seen. You were photographed. Intentionally, next to other powerful guests. That became your leash. If one spoke out, the others could bring them down with a single whisper. That's how Diddy maintained his power. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. At least on Clooney, it wasn't threats that kept these people coming back. It was promises. Promises of enduring fame, unshakable protection, and access to the true upper crust of global influence. Diddy didn't need to blackmail anyone, Clooney said. He offered something much more seductive: legacy. Then came the first piece of physical evidence. Clooney testified that just inside Diddy's lair, on a black stone pedestal, sat a ceremonial ledger, a hardcover book that each guest was required to sign upon entry, a symbolic act, a pledge of silence. "I didn't sign it," Clooney stated, "but I saw the previous page. I recognized names, dozens of them." With the precision of a man who had anticipated danger, Clooney had worn a hidden camera inside his watch. He captured an image of that page and submitted it to the court. Along with a photo, he offered a handwritten list of additional names he remembered. Figures from politics, Hollywood, and media conglomerates. "I'm not here to destroy anyone," Clooney emphasized, standing tall but visibly shaken. "But people have the right to know what's been hidden from them." He reached into his briefcase, producing a second piece of evidence, a series of video recordings. "These are from multiple gatherings," he explained, handing the drive to the prosecution. "I knew I was risking everything, but the world deserves to see what power looks like behind the curtain. I know what I'm about to reveal will horrify people," Clooney added, his voice trembling now. "But it must be said, because silence isn't safety, it's complicity. Some truths can't be whispered, they demand to be screamed." As George Clooney stood on the witness stand, his voice was low, but each syllable rang with weight, reverberating through the hushed courtroom like a solemn bell. He steadied himself, then revealed what he had risked everything to bring to light. "These," Clooney said, lifting a secure evidence bag into the air, "are the videos I covertly captured at Diddy's events. What he called the lair." He paused, letting the silence absorb his words. "I risked my life to collect them, but I couldn't stand by knowing the atrocities I witnessed were being buried, night after night behind locked doors." What followed was a chilling account of methodical preparation, carried out with the precision of someone who knew the high-stakes world of Hollywood secrecy like the back of his hand. "I wore glasses fitted with a micro camera," Clooney explained. "Not your standard novelty toy. This was top-tier surveillance tech. Stuff only people who navigate the underbelly of the entertainment industry even hear about. I'm no spy, but in a world riddled with secrets and betrayal, I had to learn how to protect myself." He confessed that even for someone who'd been in rooms with presidents and policymakers, what he saw inside Diddy's underground sanctum shook him to his core. And he knew one thing for certain: words alone wouldn't be enough. He needed irrefutable, unshakable evidence. The videos, he testified, had been carefully stored on an encrypted hard drive and locked in a reinforced safe at his Lake Como estate. What they revealed, he said, was not just a man's fall from grace, but an entire ecosystem of depravity. "This wasn't a secret Diddy stumbled into," Clooney added. "This was a world he engineered, controlled, and fed with intent." Inside the lair, Clooney described an environment that sounded more like a psychological horror film than a party. Vast, soundproof chambers sealed away from the outside world. There, every laugh, every scream, every whispered command was swallowed by the walls, never to be heard again. But the camera recorded everything. "These weren't parties," Clooney said, his voice growing strained. "They were arenas, places of corruption and submission. And the ones exploited most weren't rich or famous. They were what Diddy called nuggets, a vile nickname he used for people he deemed easy to control, often individuals with disabilities." The courtroom fell still as he explained how these vulnerable guests were used like living props, passed between masked attendees in a sickening performance of dominance and obedience. The worst part, Clooney added, was how normal it seemed to them. How routine. The laughter, the toasts. It was all part of the act. Then came the moment that broke even the most hardened courtroom regulars. Clooney recalled a specific video, one the prosecution would later describe as the heart of the case. On the screen, Diddy stood in the center of the chamber, eyes steely and voice firm. He directed masked figures to carry out what Clooney called a ritual. In the center of the room lay a blindfolded individual, one of the nuggets, positioned on a deep crimson cushion, utterly motionless. It was like watching a ceremony of darkness, Clooney said, his face pale. The person had no idea what was happening to them, but you could see the fear, even through the blindfold. I wanted to vomit. Every instinct told me to stop it, but I knew if I blew my cover, that would be the last night I ever lived. His voice cracked, but he pressed on. Diddy wasn't some passive host, he was the conductor. Every move followed a script, every whisper, every motion. It was choreographed, controlled. The videos didn't just capture the grotesque ceremonies. They also revealed another, equally damning layer: clandestine transactions and backdoor deals, carried out with chilling confidence in the same rooms. There were whispered deals, Clooney continued, politicians shaking hands, tech giants passing sealed envelopes, global policy conversations, all taking place just feet away from horrific abuse. That's what this place was. An empire built on leverage, secrecy, and fear. He submitted clips to the court, showing not just the rituals, but also the side deals, covert negotiations about investments, campaign contributions, international ventures, all filmed without the participants knowing they were being watched. Diddy's lair wasn't just a den of iniquity, it was a power hub. To safeguard the footage, Clooney said, "I stored everything on a drive no one could access, hidden, encrypted. If I went missing, I made sure it would go public. That was my insurance." Then came a confession, his voice dropping nearly to a whisper. "I realized these videos weren't just evidence against Diddy. They were something far bigger. They were proof of a system, a network built not on shared vision or values, but on control, a web of influence, corruption, and blackmail. These people didn't just act out of desire, they acted out of fear. Fear of exposure, fear of losing everything." He paused, then looked directly at the jury. "That's why I'm here. Not just for justice, but to rip off the mask. Power doesn't need to shout, it survives in silence." That was the unspoken pact between those who attended Diddy's secret gatherings. Silence in exchange for protection. No one exposed anyone, and in return, everyone remained untouchable. The unholy alliance thrived not because of loyalty, but because of mutual fear. They joined, Clooney said, his voice clear, because they knew their mutual silence would shield them all. It wasn't until Clooney made the decision to testify that he entrusted the encrypted hard drive, containing the damning footage, to his attorney. He handed it over with detailed instructions. The footage was only to be released if something happened to him, or if the trial demanded undeniable proof. "This isn't about fame," Clooney said, turning toward the jury, his eyes unwavering. "It's not about revenge. I'm doing this for those without a voice, for the ones who were turned into pawns in Diddy's game, and the victims of powerful figures like him who operate in the shadows." When a segment of the video was finally played in court, only a carefully curated few minutes were allowed, its content too disturbing for full public viewing. Still, the impact was immediate and devastating. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Jurors looked away, some bowing their heads, others covering their mouths to stifle their gasps. The clip's weight pressed on the room like a storm cloud. George Clooney, however, didn't flinch. He stood with steel in his eyes, fixed squarely on Diddy, who sat rigid at the defendant's table, his face unreadable. Then the judge, stern-faced and visibly moved, asked the question hanging in the air. Why had Clooney waited so long to come forward? The entire courtroom stilled. Clooney lowered his head for a brief moment, as though revisiting a scar long buried, then lifted his gaze and spoke with the clarity of someone bearing their soul. "Your Honor," he began, "I didn't speak earlier for 2 reasons." He took a breath. "First, I was afraid, not just for myself, but for my wife, Amal, and our children. The people in Diddy's world, those backing him, They wield a level of influence and power that the average person cannot fathom. They don't just ruin careers, they destroy lives. And they wouldn't hesitate to harm my family to keep their secrets buried. He paused, emotion tightening his throat, before continuing. And second, his voice faltered briefly, then steadied. The second reason was the night of the freak-off in 2014. He explained how he had been secretly recording one of Diddy's infamous freak-off parties, an event darker and more twisted than anything he had seen before. Clooney stayed to the shadows, doing his best to remain unnoticed. But then, out of the smoke and chatter, Diddy emerged. He looked straight at me, Clooney recalled, his tone flat, his face was expressionless, cold. He didn't say a word, just nodded toward his men. Clooney never saw the blow coming. I felt something sharp slam into the back of my head. Then they forced me to drink something, a drug. It burned going down. I couldn't breathe. My muscles seized. My body collapsed. He blacked out. When Clooney came to, he was in a hospital. Bandaged, bruised, barely able to move. His wife Amal explained what little the doctors knew. A good Samaritan had found him unconscious on a roadside, covered in injuries, and called an ambulance. He had no memory of how he got there. It took me 6 months to recover, Clooney admitted, his voice breaking. But the nightmare didn't end. Just a month after being discharged, a package arrived at his Lake Como no return address. Just a small envelope containing a USB drive and a single card. The card read, "Welcome home, George." His heart sank. Clooney took no chances. He plugged the USB into an offline laptop, shielding his main systems. What he saw nearly broke him. It was footage, he said, fists clenched. Footage of me, unconscious. They had stripped me, doused me in liquor, mocked me like I was a rag doll. They trampled my body, laughed, took turns humiliating me. Then came the moment that silenced even the most jaded in the courtroom. Diddy, Clooney whispered, stood there, calm, smirking. He was directing it like it was a scene from one of his music videos. Except this was a horror film, and I was the star. But it wasn't the beating or the mockery that left Clooney broken. It was the final frame of the video. The screen cut to Amal, he said, tears welling in his eyes. She was tied up. Her face was bruised. She looked terrified. In the background, Diddy's voice rang out, cold and measured. Go to the police, George, and your family will pay the price. The courtroom was still. No one moved. The only sound was the slow, ragged breathing of jurors processing the weight of what they had just heard. I called Diddy that night, Clooney said. Asked him what the hell he was doing. He answered, laughing. Like it was a game. Clooney stared at the courtroom floor for a long moment before recounting the moment he would never forget. The phone call that cemented the nightmare. Did you like my gift, George? Diddy asked, his voice laced with sadistic amusement. That one question, spoken with cruelty and control, echoed through Clooney's mind long after the call ended. I begged him, Clooney said, his voice cracking. I begged him to spare my family. I told him I would do anything to protect them all and our children. Diddy, cold and calculated, offered him a deal. According to Clooney's testimony, Diddy made a demand that Clooney leverage his status and connections to reach out to key figures across various industries. Clooney submitted to the court a detailed list of names Diddy had instructed him to contact. Names that included high-ranking political officials, CEOs of international corporations, and influential entertainment power brokers. Along with that list came a damning piece of evidence, a receipt for a $1 million 0-cents wire transfer sent from one of Diddy's holding companies to Clooney's personal account. The payment had been disguised as a consulting fee to evade suspicion from federal authorities and banking regulators. I did it for Amal, Clooney said, choking back emotion. I wish I could say I had a choice, but when your family's safety is used as leverage, you'll do anything. But the deeper Clooney dug into what he had unknowingly facilitated, the more horrifying the truth became. It wasn't just a shady business deal, Clooney continued. It was an arms trafficking operation. The documents were fake, the consulting firm didn't exist, everything had been orchestrated to mask the movement of weapons. After the funds were transferred and the operation complete, Diddy sent Clooney a message that chilled him to the bone. "You and I are in the same boat now, George." And that, Clooney testified, was just the beginning. Throughout 2014 and 2015, Diddy continued to tighten his grip. He coerced Clooney into participating in further illegal schemes, always backed by threats, new footage, or cryptic messages reminding Clooney of his vulnerability. "He sent me emails, texts, voice messages," Clooney said. "Each time he reminded me that he owned my silence." He described a recorded phone call from late 2015. In it, Diddy's voice was unmistakable. "You're my asset, George. Never forget that." Clooney turned over the entire collection of materials to the court. The archive included transaction records, transcripts of encrypted messages, video files of meetings with world leaders and executives, and multiple audio recordings, each piece holding the jury in rapt attention. "I didn't keep them to protect myself," he said, his tone firm. "I kept them so the truth wouldn't die with me." As Clooney stepped back from the witness stand, Diddy's defense team wasted no time launching their counterattack. Mark Agnello, the lead attorney, rose sharply. "Mr. Clooney," Agnello said, his voice cold and clinical, "are we to believe that you, a global icon, a billionaire, a man with unrestricted access to power, were coerced by Sean Combs? Why didn't you go to the police? Why wait so long?" Clooney stood still, his hands clasped, unflinching under the pressure. "Because I knew the cost of speaking out," he replied calmly. "I watched others try. I saw careers ruined, reputations burned to ash. And when my wife's life was threatened, there was no choice left." For the first time in hours, Diddy stood from the defendant's table. His voice wavered, but defiance tinged every word. "George, you're lying," Diddy said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "I never touched you. I never touched your wife. This is all a show to take me down." Murmurs rippled through the gallery, but the judge's gavel came down hard, silencing the room. Clooney turned slowly, meeting Diddy's eyes across the courtroom. His reply was steady, emotionless. "Sean, you know the truth, and so do the cameras. The videos don't lie." George Clooney's testimony didn't just strike a blow against Diddy. It detonated a legal and cultural time bomb. The guest book from the lair, the financial records, the footage, the names, the voice messages. All of it now sat in evidence, a powder keg that could engulf the political, corporate, and entertainment elite. For those named in the documents, subpoenas and investigations loomed like gathering storm clouds. Politicians, celebrities, and executives, once untouchable, were now tethered to Clooney's revelations. And the nation watched with bated breath, but while the public absorbed the scandal, one question lingered in every headline, every late-night discussion, every tweet: what is the cost of truth? For George Clooney, it could mean exile from Hollywood, the collapse of relationships forged over decades, and worst of all, the looming threat that Diddy's people, or those tied to him, might once again come for his family. As Clooney's testimony echoed beyond the courtroom, the world was forced to confront a disturbing reality. When power becomes protection for the wicked, who dares to break the silence? The empire Diddy built, one veiled in luxury but rooted in fear, was not a solo construct. It was an institution fed by silence, intimidation, and bribes. But even more damning was the quiet complicity of those who knew and said nothing. It thrived not only on Diddy's will, but on the indifference of those who looked away, and the ambition of those who traded their integrity for a place in the spotlight. One name in particular shook the courtroom to its core. Janice Combs, Diddy's own mother, dragged into the harsh glare of the trial, She was no longer just the doting parent of a music mogul. Clooney testified that she had attended several of Diddy's notorious white parties, not as a bystander, but as a strategic presence, smoothing over strained ties between Diddy and political or business elites whenever things began to unravel. She knew everything, Clooney declared, his voice unwavering. She wasn't just Diddy's mother, she was part of the machine. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. This wasn't just an attack on a public figure's family, it was a haunting accusation. How far will blood loyalty go? And what price will a family pay to protect their own? Especially when protection means shielding criminality. As Clooney stepped down from the witness stand, the air grew heavy. The weight of his testimony settled over everyone. He had paid a steep price, the threat to his family's safety, his public reputation, and countless nights of fear and emotional torment. But what he gave in return was something far greater. A spark, a sign that justice, even when buried under layers of power, deception, and silence, can still claw its way to the surface. Because this trial isn't just about one man. It's not just about Diddy. It's about the machine behind him. It's about the structures that allow power to fester, unchecked, unchallenged, and unquestioned. This is the story of how fame can become a weapon, how silence can become complicity, and how truth, no matter how long it takes, can finally find its voice. So now we ask, will justice truly be served? Or is this merely one chapter in an endless saga of secrets buried beneath Hollywood's red carpets and Capitol Hill court? The answer doesn't just lie in a courtroom. It lies with you, with every person bold enough to ask questions, with every viewer who refuses to look away, with every citizen who understands that truth, no matter how dark or dangerous, is worth the light. If you believe in uncovering what others want buried, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, share this story, because in the next episode, we're going deeper. We'll be revealing more names from Clooney's secret list, names that could ignite political firestorms and shake Hollywood's elite to their core. This isn't just a story, this is a reckoning. Don't miss what comes next.